6 more books. It's finite though. You see, I don't just.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You're not.
I could keep going, but I'm not. I've only got a pile of 6 more here. Okay, number 7. Probably saw this one coming. Bad Pharma: How Drug Companies Mislead Doctors and Harm Patients, by Ben Goldacre. We've talked about this before a little bit, and it's just really important. And frankly, the title says most of it, except that this is not a short book, and it's extraordinarily well researched. And there's a lot here to learn from with regard to what standard operating practice as of 2012, which is when the first edition of this book came out, was in the relationship between pharmaceutical companies and doctors, and also research, both academic and industry.
Yeah, I would recommend actually people check out a TED Talk by the author called "What Doctors Don't Know About the Drugs They Prescribe." It is quite good. He's an excellent speaker as well. I do wonder where he is in the pandemic. I find it shocking that somebody who knows as much about pharma's corruption of medicine is missing how much corruption is shaping our response to this. And anyway, I hope he arrives soon.
Yeah. Number 8 on the list: Anatomy of an Epidemic: Magic Bullets, Psychiatric Drugs, and the Astonishing Rise of Mental Illness in America, by Robert Whitaker. Again, extraordinary, terrifying, brilliantly researched. Here's just one thing from it. Actually sure if this is going to show, because I've only got the hard copy here. Here we have, I've got it book darted twice. It's funny. Long-term recovery rates for schizophrenic patients. 2-year follow-up through 15-year follow-up. The y-axis is 0 to 50%. And for those of you who, let's see if I can, oh wait, there's my camera. For those of you just listening, and now I'm just going from memory because I can't see the thing anymore. Basically, those who are off antipsychotics have a much higher rate of recovery from schizophrenia than those who are on antipsychotics. The people who are on antipsychotics have a recovery rate in the 5 to 10% range from schizophrenia, and those who are off antipsychotics have a recovery rate in the 40 to 45% range. So that in a nutshell is the kind of result and then analysis that he's doing in this book. And it's terrifying.
I would point out this stands to reason, right? Your brain and the mind phenomenon that it creates are a tool, a means to an end. And to the extent that they are malfunctioning, that's bad for the creature. And so they are built to self-correct. Lots of things about us are built to self-correct. And if your instinct is to medicate something, right, that's your response, then the point is what you do is you remove the ability for the system to detect what's wrong and to repair. And so and something you didn't mention here, and we've talked about it before, I think, on the podcast, is that in other parts of the world, people who have a schizophrenic break often recover, right? They have one. They don't, it's not that they're schizophrenic, it's that they had an episode and it goes away. And so there's a question, and anytime you see a pattern like that, the question is, well, what are we doing that's messing that up?
Yeah.
Right. Obviously that's something that we should be seeking.
Yeah.
It might even, if you knew why that was distinct, you might even be able to eliminate the problem altogether. And in fact, we propose something in our book. Let's not go into it now, but anyway, there may well, it's clearly, at least largely, a novelty problem. And that means the solution, at least for people who haven't yet come down with it, is likely recognizing what the novel influence is and corralling it.
Yeah, the way you said that made me think, all this language policing that is happening, especially in the woke world, around, what it is that you call people. And, you can't say a fat person, you have to say a person of fatness.
I don't think that's the one.
A person of obesity. No, actually, like a person of size. Believe me, there are stupid ways that you're supposed to say it, and you're not supposed to.
Oh, I know there are stupid ways.
You're not supposed to adjectivize, right? And, like, black person, fat person, gay person, right? Like, this is actually, I'm not sure we're ever told not to do this with the LGBTQ thing, which is, always interesting, the inconsistencies in the policing and the framework that we're supposed to be adopting. But there is, as with so many of these things, at base, something real to talk about and something real to consider, that, if in the rest of the world, without our modern pharmaceutical interventions around at least mental illness like schizophrenia, people aren't schizophrenic for life. They tend to have a schizophrenic episode. Then presumably people aren't understood as schizophrenics, 10 years after that one episode that they had. And so training ourselves to understand these things that we are currently doing or experiencing or are happening to us, and therefore feel like the entirety of our experience, as temporary things that are, in a way, passing through us, or we're passing through the time period where they are us, can be a way to escape from what seems like the permanence of, whatever hell you may think you're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm a depressed person. You're experiencing a depressive episode right now, and let's get you out of that. But this too shall pass.
Yeah, unless you rush to medicate it, so the system does not have a calibration
precisely
to get you out.
Yeah, actually, that's thank you, because that's actually where I was going. That I think the tyranny of metrics and the perverse incentives of the companies that make money from keeping people medicated for life creates a world in which it is all too easy to see ourselves as patients, as consumers, as schizophrenics or depressives, or whatever it is that your diagnosis is. And you're not your diagnosis. You're many, many more things than that.
Yeah,
and you shouldn't identify as a consumer, for sure.
There's something. Obviously there are good doctors out there, but there's something about, maybe it is even the reward structure for a doctor, where when they are able to give you something, they're able to identify the condition and give you something that gives you relief or causes the problem to go away. Yeah. You're right. They've done their job. Whereas, let's compare, okay, they give you a drug that solves some problem you've got, right? That's a very aggressive intervention. Whereas advising you that you're probably vitamin D deficient during the winter and should probably supplement, you'll never know the things that you've been saved from, right? Because you just simply won't come down with them. And so it doesn't strike you, oh my God, that doctor's great. He saved me, 3 colds this winter, right? You don't feel that. It's not the same thing. And so, if you think about medicine as some kind of analog for our online environment where you're induced to do things by a dopamine reward, doctors are also apes that are driven by dopamine rewards, and the rewards are not well structured to result in the best medical treatment, which is, I'm sure, one contributor to the reason that there is so much bad medicine.
Yes. Oh, that's brilliant. Yes. Okay. 2 books of a slightly different sort, both of which we've talked about on here. Again, I've taken off the book jacket, but Live Not by Lies by Dreher, which we spent almost an entire episode on a while back. The subtitle is A Manual for Christian Dissidents, and this is written just in 2020. It came out, I think, last summer, which is when we talked about it, and it really describes, again, somewhat terrifyingly, and in terrific detail, with stories from people who have lived through totalitarian regimes and who actually do this. This is one of the few places where I, at least, have seen the description of what it feels like as it comes on. So this is a very important book, and it's of course named for the Solzhenitsyn essay of the same name, which is also terrific and highly recommended and findable online. So Live Not by Lies, Solzhenitsyn essay, originally from, I guess, mid-20th century, and then Dreher's book in 2020 of the same name. Yeah,
it is obviously a moment that we should be reading the 5 or 6, maybe it's 10 or 12 good things on this topic, because obviously most people are missing what's taking place right in front of them, and we're having stupid arguments about whether it's even happening.
Right. And I didn't put on the book I haven't reread actually 1984 and Brave New World and Catch-22, all of which we've talked about here, but I haven't reread them recently enough to put them here. Or actually the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, which I read my first quarter in college. I think does this, brilliantly as well. But there's a lot not on this list.
Right.
All right. However, this is one that is Eric Hoffer, The True Believer. Thoughts on the nature of mass movements. So just in light of conversations about mass formation and such, Eric Hoffer, this is from mid 20th century, 1951, does a fantastic job of describing what it looks like from the outside and to some degree on the inside. So here are just two very brief quotes from Hoffer, again written over half a century ago. Whence come the fanatics, he asks. Mostly from the ranks of the non-creative men of words. The most significant division between men of words is between those who can find fulfillment in creative work and those who cannot. I'll read just two more sentences here. The creative man of words, no matter how bitterly he may criticize and deride the existing order, is actually attached to the present. His passion is to reform and not to destroy. So he finds, and I think he's right, that so much, and again, he's talking about fanatics in the mid 20th century, are people who are literate, people of letters, people in the so-called intellectual class, the lettered class, perhaps the elite, you might call them, but who don't actually have much original to offer. And so they become more easily attracted to and perhaps indebted to fanaticism.
Well, it's actually a corollary of what you and I talk about with respect to the importance of education, including interaction with physical systems in that you can't fool, that are not socially mediated.
Yes.
And so we do find all sorts of people who are very learned in some way, some book way, but it is not tested against reality. These people can become extremely enamored of ideas that are terrible because they don't spot why they're terrible. And I will say, I think the inverse is true, that in general, if you meet somebody, there are people who work with their hands badly, but they don't tend to stick with it. People who have a tradition of working with their hands tend to be very down to earth, because the thing is, if you're not down to earth and you're doing some physical thing, then you're constantly frustrated because it doesn't work. And so you have to sort of accept, its authority. You have to accept the authority of the physical world over whatever you're trying to do. And that I wonder if it doesn't just make you a better, less dangerous human being.
That's fascinating. I've never thought to frame it in those terms that you just did. You have to respect the authority of the thing that you are working with, the physical system that is giving you feedback. And that helps you learn not to follow false authority, actually. Yeah. Because you recognize, you come to understand what real authority is in the form of, gravity or, forces from a saw or the, chemical leavening agents in a cake, and there's just no negotiating with them.
Yeah, actually, I had an interesting one yesterday. I have first in my lifetime physical experience that taught me what I was misunderstanding. We have this power washer, and Toby had used it to power wash something for us.
Toby, who was 15.
He's 15.
Strapping young man.
And he had put the hose on it, the pressure side hose, right? And I went to take it off to put the thing away, and I could not dislodge the thing. I got to the point of using wrenches. I still couldn't dislodge.
Nor could he.
Right. Nobody could.
Nor could anyone in the family.
And so, I didn't think he was especially likely to have put it on that. if he'd put it on too tight, right, and nobody could get it off by hand, surely a wrench would do it. But no, this thing was on there like nothing I've ever. And it turned out when I finally dislodged it, that the thing was still pressurized. That the hose was still pressurized and full of water. So it was pushing the threads against each other in such a way that they were basically, probably they had galled together, right? Yeah, that's the term.
I actually don't recognize that term. Galled is what you said?
Yeah, I reserve the right to discover 5 minutes after the podcast is over that I've forgotten the right term. But I believe galling, when you take two, like let's say you have a nut and a bolt of the same metal, right? And you screw them together very tightly. Well, if you screw them together...
And they're appropriate for each other. They've got the right threads.
Correct threads. But if you screw them together really tightly, what happens is the two objects are put so close together that some of the molecules sort of forget whether they're nut or bolt. And so basically they weld, right? And so it's very hard to break them free. And there are various things you can do. You can put a thin film of something in there, grease or whatever. But anyway, the pressure in this system made what went on by hand impossible to remove by wrench.
Well, he and I did get our comeuppance because we were standing rather too close at the point you finally got it free.
Yeah, it was really something.
Yes. Luckily, it was already pouring out, so we were already somewhat damp.
I learned we all survived.
Yes, we sure did.
Yeah.
Okay, number 11 on this book, and there are some other things we want to talk about today, but this is, of course, taking a while, is something probably no one's going to be expecting is Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff. This is just such a terrific book to explore what is possible and what people who have something they want to accomplish in the world and are driven to do it no matter what some other people think the value is can do. And it's of course brilliantly written. Again, Tom Wolfe recently died as well, I think.
Did he?
Oh God, maybe he didn't.
Maybe he didn't.
Okay, I'll figure that out.
Tom, please take care of yourself if you're still alive. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to wish him well, but I'm not absolutely certain. I might have missed, the news that he's gone, but I don't know that he's gone.
Zach, if you have the ability to figure out that would be fabulous. Okay. And
actually, if you can get him on the phone, just put him through.
Yeah. Terrific. I don't have much more to say about this, but when my eyes fell onto this on my shelf, I thought this belongs on a list of important books that are relevant for the moment to give people hope, actually, about what we can be, what extraordinary things people can do.
And he is no longer alive.
He is no longer alive.
Yeah.
All right.
We didn't do that, did we, Zach?
Within 2018 apparently.
Okay.
And then finally, the 12th book on this list of important books is Sebastian Junger's Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging, a book that I've read from before. Utterly brilliant and short. I was going to say utterly short, which is not, that short doesn't really go with utterly, but I have a very short excerpt to read from this. Contempt is often directed at people who have been excluded from a group or declared unworthy of its benefits. Contempt is often used by governments to provide rhetorical cover for torture or abuse. Contempt is one of 4 behaviors that, statistically, can predict divorce in married couples. People who speak with contempt for one another will probably not remain united for long. The most alarming rhetoric comes out of the dispute between liberals and conservatives, and it's a dangerous waste of time because they're both right. The perennial conservative concern about high taxes supporting a non-working underclass has entirely legitimate roots in our evolutionary past and shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. Early hominids lived a precarious existence where freeloaders were a direct threat to survival, and so they developed an exceedingly acute sense of whether they were being taken advantage of by members of their own group. But by the same token, one of the hallmarks of early human society was the emergence of a culture of compassion that cared for the ill, the elderly, the wounded, and the unlucky. In today's terms, that is a common liberal concern that also has to be taken into account. Those two driving forces have coexisted for hundreds of thousands of years in human society and have been duly codified in this country as a two-party political system. The eternal argument over so-called entitlement programs, and more broadly over liberal and conservative thought, will never be resolved because each side represents an ancient and absolutely essential component of our evolutionary past. So how do you unify a secure, wealthy country that has sunk into a zero-sum political game with itself? How do you make veterans feel that they are returning to a cohesive society that was worth fighting for in the first place? I put that question to Rachel Yehuda of Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. Yehuda has seen up close the effect of such antisocial divisions on traumatized vets. Quote, If you want to make a society work, then you don't keep underscoring the places where you're different. You underscore your shared humanity, she told me. I'm appalled by how much people focus on differences. Why are you focusing on how different you are from one another and not on the things that unite us?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's square on. And I would just say the other thing is don't let people emphasize your differences, because that's what's happening. There is a reason that we are divided at the razor's edge, and we now have routine photo finish elections, and that is not about some organic phenomenon. That is about our division being necessary to whatever it is that is governing us continuing to do what it does without having to pay too much attention to what we need or want.
Exactly right. And to the degree that Junger has accurately described some of the fundamental positions of liberals versus conservatives, and I think he has, so much of what the Democrats and the Republicans currently represent has very little to do with those things. And, you know, we as having been lifelong Democrats are more attuned to the changes in the Democratic Party, but certainly it has strayed very, very, very far from its traditional, its historic values.
Well, I would say, I mean, you know, it's interesting because we spend so much time now interacting with honorable conservatives that I have to go back and look at what I used to think about Republicans and say, did I have it right? And have things changed? Did I have it wrong? And it's a mixture, but but I have thought.
But also with regard to the Democratic Party itself. Is that
right?
Yeah.
So the Democratic, so it used to be a division between more or less management and labor. Right. And the Democrats represented labor. And with Clinton, they became direct competitors with the Republicans, and they competed over management, and they abandoned labor.
Yeah.
And so the point is, in my opinion, the Republican Party was more corrupt because it was more closely aligned with capital. Not that the unions weren't corrupt, because they were, but nonetheless, because it was the C-suite, the corruption was direct. And then the Democrats took over the model, and they basically set up their own racket. Mm-hmm. And now I think in some ways, maybe in many ways, they have exceeded the Republicans in their corruption. And so, you know, I do have to sort of go back decades and think, actually, you know, Democrats have not been very good at representing labor in a very, very long time. But labor is at least a natural entity that does encompass most of us. Yes. And it's been a long time since I've seen the Democratic Party give any thought to those people.